Nicholas Opiyo, you're a human rights lawyer, but also importantly, it's always a pleasure to have you on these days to have a conversation around these matters that's speaking to human rights abuse. Now, of course, I'm sure you have followed this episode very closely, including that press conference where the police chief, General Kale Kayihura, did commend his boys for doing a commendable job on the crowds. First, what's your take on the way the police is beginning to behave themselves lately? Or are we only just blowing something that has already been in existence, but we are only turning a blind eye to it?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Simon. It's always a pleasure to share my morning with you and the viewers of NTV. I think that Ugandans have a very short memory. What is happening right now is not the first time this is happening. I do recall very well when the Honorable Woman MP for Kampala, Nabila Nagai Sempala, was to put it mildly, roughed up at Owino Market. I was seated right at the police headquarters in an adjacent office next to that of the IGP, Kale Kayihura, in an office of another AIGP then. And I do recall Kale Kayihura walking down the corridor and really thanking the ladies who had literally undressed the MP, and asking one of his officers to go and summon them so that he could congratulate them. So this kind of practice has been happening for a very long time. It does appear that the police is degenerating into actions that are not expected of the police force. Actions such as brutality, such as whipping of the public. And I can tell you, the Chiboko squad happened, many other incidents thereafter followed. The police addressed the press, and saying, we don't know who they are. We condemn these actions. We don't know who they are. We are going to investigate. No investigations.
And just like you, I was at CPS there 2005 when the Kiboko squad emanated from the central police station like a swarm of bees, beating everything in its wake.
So we shouldn't behave like this is the first time this is happening. It has happened before. The IGP has addressed the press and promised investigations, and nothing has happened.
But this time around, he says he even wants to thank them.
What is peculiar about this is what seems to be apparent contradictions within government about how to handle the latest episode of police violence. You have a whole Deputy Prime Minister, the Honorable Moses Ali, thanking the police and saying, look, this is better than tear gas. At least we should whip. Whipping is okay. And you have the IGP as well thanking them on the one hand, and then you have the Minister of Internal Affairs demanding that the police should apologize.
Right over there. Doesn't Moses Ali make a point? Tear gas is indiscriminate. I mean, you're just going about your business. You're a little child in school attending class, and there is a riotous community outside the school gate. They lob tear gas canisters at them, and you get affected, you get choked. But with canes, it is directly to whatever. I mean, possibly Moses Ali has a point.
Look, any man in good standing and in good conscience cannot find any justification or excuse for the use of violence against civilians like we saw on the street. So General Moses Ali and all his ilk must be ashamed of trying to justify what we saw on TV, what was captured on camera, which was an evident criminality. But to go back to the point that I was making, that you have different government agencies, the Minister of Internal Affairs, effectively the IGP's supervisor, the Minister of State, asking the police to apologize for their actions. And on the other hand, you have a police force purportedly trying officers within the disciplinary committee process. So all this is confusing, but speaks to one thing, that the police internal disciplinary proceedings they're fast, they're a waste of time. They cannot be a substitute for criminal prosecutions, for cases of criminality that we saw the police getting engaged in. And in my own view, these officers and their leaders must face criminal charge and accountability for these actions that they make.
Maybe then I'll ask the cliche question, who bears the cut? Well, I've seen your colleague Ladislas Rwakafuzi getting, one or two victims and saying, we are going to the courts of law and all that, but isn't that a little too little?
As day follows night, there are going to be suits against individual officers and the police leadership for those actions and actions that preceded that. That is for sure going to happen.
How do I take your word for gospel truth, Nicholas? Well, you are just here panditing with me. Maybe you may want to tell me something I do not know. Have you already been approached by some clients, or are you looking out? Are you William Van Chesing?
We have been approached. We have interviewed several people who were whipped by the police for doing nothing but just working in their shops. We have people who were whipped by soldiers before, downtown Kampala, and we are preparing prosecutions for those police officers. I don't make empty promises. You're going to see these cases coming to court.
Well,
but more importantly, I think
you've
for
managed
me,
to tell me this morning. Which is
but more importantly for me, the director of criminal prosecutions in this country must take his role seriously, because he has the mandate to investigate all crime, whether at his own initiative or when it is reported by somebody. What we saw was criminality. And I think that the DPP must invoke his powers under the Constitution and put a process forward to investigate this criminality with a view of prosecuting them. But more importantly for me, I think the time is now for us to ask questions of the police force. We have made the point before that police internal disciplinary proceedings, both the Professional Standards Unit and the Disciplinary Court, have been abused to the detriment of police officers, but more importantly, to hide criminality. They're not processes that ensure accountability, but rather shield officers from prosecution.
Or
in some cases,
some powerful persons.
And powerful persons, in some cases actually, which hunt junior police officers. The time is now to have a serious discussion about an independent police oversight body, like we have in other countries, because the police cannot investigate themselves. Any such investigation will always lack credibility, and I think that the time is now to make the point about an independent police oversight body.
And who heads that? I mean, already we have a Ministry of Internal Affairs, which in essence should be putting the police to some kind of check. But if it's being led by civilians and persons who don't consider themselves to have any political clout or relationship with the chief of the, the commander-in-chief, at the end of the day, it remains another lame duck institution that you're asking for.
Well, in other countries where it has worked, what you need to do is just clothe that body with legal powers to carry out independent investigation, ensure that the people who sit on that body have security of tenure, have physical security to do their work. So I think it is possible. It's been done elsewhere.
What would we call it?
The Independent Police Oversight Body. Simon, I had the privilege of taking part in a process that was eventually scuttled by the IGP for a police review exercise. This process was a three-stage process. It began with the police themselves going out to carry out a feasibility study, whether there was a need to review and reform the police force in the same way the UPDF was reformed. The police's own internal feasibility study indicated that there was urgent need for police review and a police reform exercise. The second stage was supposed to be a national consultation process where consultants were hired, people were asked to go out throughout the country. We went out throughout this country for a period of over 8 months. The police put together a police review team that was headed by, may his soul rest in peace, Afande, I forget his name, Sharita Julius. Yes. It had eminent officers like Dr. John Kamia, Nwajira, and the rest. That process went throughout this country, spoke to ordinary Ugandans, spoke to police officers across this country. Over 8,000 people were interviewed in a space of over 9 months. All of them said there was need to reform this police force. And we came up with recommendations of about 1,400 pages. These recommendations were put forward to the police authorities, and they just trashed it. So over $1 million was spent, 9,000 people were interviewed in a space of over 9 months, and this whole process was botched. The process for reviewing an overhaul of this police force is long overdue, and I think that we need to have that discussion. But in the immediate future, if I may seek your indulgence, in the immediate future, we must have open, transparent, and public investigations about the conduct of police officers in managing public assemblies. Not just this particular event, but the events that have preceded this last one. We must have that discussion, I think, quite urgently.
Let's bring it down from the up intellectual dice in which you want to discuss it, which is, by the way, very illegal and it's very okay. But does it boil down to the politics of the day, that you have a partisan police, so to speak, or led by people that look at every situation from a political lens?
That is absolutely true. The police force, and
that is unacceptable in a democratic society as we want to claim Uganda is, and that any deviance from each should be faced with the kind of legal legal mitigations that there are in the books, which I don't think we are short of.
If you speak to professional police officers, forget the soldier in Kaihura who purports to be a police officer. He's not a police officer. His training, his mentality is that of a soldier. So what he's doing at police is soldiering, not policing. But if you speak to professional police officers, career police officers, they will tell you that the police force they see today is different from the police force they knew or that they know as a professional police force. There are several officers in that force who, to my knowledge, have applied to retire because they're tired of what's happening in the police force. So the need for that police force to be brought down to a civilian police force, the one that we knew that you would run to for help, cannot be overstated. And I think that the leadership of General Kale Kaihura of the police force has drifted the police force away from the core function of the police force to mere politicking. The police is shift and employs a lot of resources to solve political problems as opposed to investigate criminality. And I'll give you 2 examples.
Please.
When a family of 9 were hacked to death in Kisoro, General Kale Kaihura pitched camp in Kisoro and promised this country accountability. What he called accountability was dismissed on arrival in court because he was simply involved in politicking. If you recall the cases, the people who he took to police were acquitted even before being put to their own defense. There have been several other such cases where he has gone down and promised investigations, nothing has happened. Next month will be 2 years, I think about 4 years since the killing of an innocent kid in Masaka, a 12-year-old. I have videos of Kale Kaihura sitting on a mat in the village, promising that family justice. Nothing has happened until now. Last week I visited a family here in Busega of a lady whose son was shot and killed right inside her shop in 2009. General Kale Kaihura promised investigations. Nothing has happened to date, and yet he is very willing to deploy resources to disperse peaceful assemblies, to follow opposition politicians. I think he needs to get back to the core function of the force, investigating crimes.
Maybe let's look at the personal character and the conduct of General Kale Kaihura and his modus operandi. You may say it's politicking, policing, but I think he's taken this policing thing to other levels of maybe celebrity policing, where you're quick to wear your best pips and show up, make a face on TV, give bang tables in interviews, and all that dissipates in thin air. And we saw that the time he was decorated as a general, he organized supporters and they marched to the streets of Kampala in what would otherwise be a disruptive, illegal assembly, but nonetheless, he did it. He loves the media, he loves grandstanding. And I don't think that would be a good hallmark of a police command. I think, let's be honest here, I think his leadership would go down history as one of the worst leaderships of Uganda police. What do you think, Nicholas?
Well, don't take my word for it. Police officers who have served in that police have written missives saying exactly that. The former Deputy IGP, Mr. Odue, has said exactly that. People who are experienced in policing have said exactly that. Justice James Ogola, the former principal judge, retired now and head of the Elders Forum, said when the clouds have cleared, this era, and I quote, the era of Kale Kaihura will be remembered as the era of tear gas, not one of rule of law. And I think that that is an indictment on his tenure in the police force. And I think that this will haunt him for the rest of his life, wherever he will go after his...
Does General Kale listen to people? Does he listen to advice? Have you spoken to him about this?
I have spoken to General Kale Kaihura, and on a one-to-one, he's a very nice person. He accepts that they've made mistakes. He will promise you investigations. He will promise you actions. In fact, you go to his office, he will call police officers and shout the hell out of them. But that is where it ends.
The same thing, celebrity
that's where
policing,
it ends.
his show off.
That's exactly where it ends. And I think that it's just because he's not a police officer. He is by training a soldier. To him, the person at the other end of an assembly is an enemy, not a person exercising his fundamental right.
General Katumba in the same position, and the same cannot be said about him, and yet General Katumba, by all intents and purposes, is a soldier like Kale.
Well, General Katumba Wamala perhaps could have been a more, I think he's remembered for begging for money from people to buy police cars. But in terms of improving the police functions that we know it, I think he didn't do much. Look, under General Kaihura and General Katumba Wamala, police stations and where officers live, I think a cow kraal in some places is far better. And their solution to it is put big billboards around it. You go to, go to Wandegea, go to.
And that's in the city before you go to these shacks that are littered across the country.
In the heart of the city. Their solution to hiding the rot in police quarters is to put big billboards of...
And charge humongous sums of money, by the way, by the billboard company.
To cover it up. So they have not done anything to improve the welfare of police officers. They've not done anything to improve the living and working conditions
So
of
one
police
can actually
officers.
argue that the violence we see being meted onto ordinary citizens by some of these police constables is a frustration on the side of the police constables from the terrible way they are remunerated, the welfare not being in any sense, and being forced for the most part to do things that they don't believe in their conscience they're supposed to be doing. When you look at an ordinary police constable, don't you see a frustrated guy who's out venting their frustration on innocent civilians, and not so much because they're under the command to do so?
I have visited, Simon, nearly every police station in this country. First, as part of the police review exercise, but secondly, as a lawyer. I have seen living conditions and working conditions of police officers. It is far from comfortable. While the big people in Kampala wear expensive colognes and wear gold rings and take their kids to hospitals in India and around the world, and drive, beautiful big cars, and, ordinary police officers live a deplorable life. It is quite possible that they are also angry, and what you see them doing on the street is a spillover.
Yes.
It's just a spillover of their anger, and perhaps to show, But I think that notwithstanding, a professional police force, professional in the sense that is properly trained, is properly instructed, has proper command, that should not be a problem. That your living conditions, then all of us have problems in our homes. Mm-hmm. We have stresses in our lives, but we don't have it spill over in our work because we are professionals. We keep it intact. We keep it under control.
You divorce the two lives, the professional life and your private life. Handle them separately.
We do. And I think that the police force must not use that as an excuse for meting out violence on the people in this country. I think the problem is in the police force. Because of the way that the police force has been run under General Kale Kaihura, everybody is yearning to impress him because they know he likes violence, they know he praises people who beat up other people, and so they're always doing things to catch his attention. And I'll tell you, I have been to police stations, and I think that there is also now, within the police, a parallel police force that is informal, that is non-accountable, that has no clear structure for command. You
preempted my next question indeed. There is that para-police arrangement. I mean, this guy that was unveiled by the Daily Monitor over the weekend, the former Iraqi guard and all that, he's into the police and he's whipping people alongside the police. You've seen all these guys with masks. Later on, they remove their masks, they wear civilian clothes, but they don't have a police number. But they are part of the police. They're called informers. That informal structure around them, and that's all abated by the IGP himself. Doesn't that bother folks like you to the extent of taking tangible action? Go to courts of law, maybe redeem this country. Because it's not enough for you, Nicholas, to go hopping from one radio station, TV station to another, decrying the police force. But I think it's within your means to do something more tangible than that.
Well, and something is being done about it. There is a parallel police force created by General Kale Kaihura, an informal police force whose mission appears to be to do the dirty job that an otherwise uniform police officer would feel restrained to do.
Because of the uniform?
Because of the uniform, but also because perhaps they're properly trained. But there is an illegal parallel force within this government that I think extends beyond the police force. It is the shadow state, it is the informal state that is shadowy, it's opaque, has no structures, and yet they're commanding DPCs on the streets to beat up people. I mean, this guy they claim is from Iraq. You saw him holding a radio call that seems to be a radio call that is a preserve of the armed forces. He was giving instructions. We have seen police officers being instructed on the street in full view of camera by masked men, and nothing is done. So I think that while I think talking about it is great, we must create public awareness. We must expose this rot within the police force and expose Kale Kaihura for what it is and what's done in the police force. I think that we shouldn't discredit speaking on radio or TV, but I think that you're right, we have to take actions, and actions will be taken to make sure that that police force is held to account. I'll give an example. When a journalist went to Kizza Besigye's house, an APF journalist, Mr. Kasemani was tear gassed, pepper sprayed. He was doing nothing. He was simply holding a camera and taking pictures. A non-uniform guy walked up to him and pepper sprayed just him and nobody else several times and walked away. In full view of the police force, nothing was done. We've pursued that case, we're pursuing that case, and anybody who knows any of those guys, let us know.
Nicholas, it's always a pleasure to have you have this conversation here. But let's, as we conclude, put timelines to this, because I think it's very important to hit a matter while it's still hot. You're talking about some action that will be done, some kind of recourse that's going to be taken, when and how. Maybe just throw some light onto that. Why are you trying to keep the cat so
No, I mean, there's nothing to hide about this. Individual police officers, including the IGP, will be sued in court. The courts are now in recess. When the courts return from recess, there will be attempts to sue them in court. I am aware that some cases have already been filed. There will be several complaints filed at the Human Rights Commission to challenge the Human Rights Commission to stand up to its responsibility, to investigate and provide justice. There will be several other actions taken against the police force. And these are no empty threats. And in fact, they're just not threats. We're just doing the right thing.
Nicholas Opiyo has said, couldn't have said it better, as he analyzes for us and makes some, give perspective to what we see on the streets as an increasingly violent police. And that's for a fact that now what's coming out very clear is that time is nigh for any officer to hide behind the whole collective responsibility umbrella and say, well, if there's going to be a lawsuit, it's going to be against the police and not I as an individual. But it looks like those who are really concerned with taking some remedial or recourse in the law are looking out for individual police officers, errant as they may be, and take them on head on, including their commander up to the highest level of the Inspector General of Police. And maybe that's a call on all of you who've got some information in that regard to possibly contact the likes of Nicholas to ensure that you make their work easier in regard to investigating and putting things together. We can't thank you more, our viewers, for always staying put to have a conversation with us remotely from wherever you are for the big story. Nicholas, always a pleasure to have you around, and more quality programming continues here on Morning at NTV. Stay with us.